What's up, everybody? It's your boy Thamziri from X to Skip podcast, bringing you the preview of the Final Fantasy XVI demo. The full game is set to release on June 22nd of 2023 on most platforms, but we're going to be showcasing it on the PlayStation 5. So, let's get into it. Alright, so first up, we got to look at some of the controls after installing the game and actually getting it started. Now, what I pretty much liked about this, and I guess this will happen on Xbox as well, but every time you go through one of the options, the controller itself vibrates, which, I mean, it's a little bit of a nerdy thing to like, but I kind of like that. You know, it kind of gives me that whole UI UX experience, but yeah, just a little nerdy tidbit of that. Okay, so starting off with one of the most honest parts of this review, and that is going to be comfortability of the controls as well as the game as a whole. Okay, so I'm going to try break this down into the combat itself, the lock-on mechanisms, the abilities, as well as a whole lot more. But just starting out already, the movement was pretty nice. What I did notice when playing the game is for most of the movements, which I guess is pretty much expected on consoles specifically, was how almost every movement that you made had some sort of a vibration to the controller. That was actually pretty nice. You know, you could pretty much tell every step I'm taking, there'll be like a slight vibration to me running, to me getting thudded, you know, whatever it may be. So the controls were pretty nice in that aspect. I would say that pretty much some of the, what would you call them? I guess quick time events. Some of the quick time events were very much easy to land. There was some instances of evasion quick time events as well as attack or combat quick time events, which, I mean, you guys will soon see in the video, when I'll break it down. But yeah, all in all, everything was pretty relaxed in terms of movements, as well as character control. Obviously, you could adjust some of the settings in terms of sensitivity, but just playing on default was good enough for me and pretty much all that I needed.
Looks like they're getting ready for supper.
I think someone's hungry.
You've seen enough.
Forgive me, my lord, but I need to finish inspecting these crystals.
Wouldn't do to give our soldiers spent shards.
Make sure all the crystals are accounted for.
All right, let's get this stuff unpacked before the Duchess calls for our heads.
Preparation is key.
We must be ready.
They've closed the gates.
Let's hope the side entrance is still open.
Make sure you get a good edge on that, eh?
I know! I'm not about to send our lads off.
Nice and quiet in here, isn't it? There's Joshua.
Marquis, forgive my man, he'll be done in a jiffy. Just getting the place tidied up for the big procession.
Alright, so another interesting thing that I found with regards to the movement, and this is generally when you're moving between, you know, one quest from the other. generally the game doesn't exactly tell you where to go. I mean, besides that little blinker and direction. But as for how to get there from within the room that you're in, and this is something I found quite often in the game, is not exactly knowing where to go. As you see, it's pointing up to where it is, but I don't know where the stairs are. I had to, do some exploration. So that's kind of okay, I suppose. The game doesn't really spoon feed you all that much. Another interesting tool that they also have, in the times that you're trying to find your objective, is that they have a tool called Animal Instinct, which is where you just hold down on the left analog, and through what you just saw now, I'm able to pretty much hone my instincts and my hearing, I guess, to try find where I need to go. It will basically pan the camera towards the location that I need to be in. And yeah, I guess that's one of the most interesting things. So it does now and then take some time to pretty much find where I need to go. Alright, so another interesting thing about the movement that I found is that if you're not being led by an NPC and you're still left to, use your animal instinct to try find your objective, in cases where you don't get a set objective and you have to follow an NPC, the movement is kind of okay, but it's still to the sense where, the NPCs will stand and wait for you if you're too far from them, which, look, I don't have much beef against. Stay close to me as much as possible, just so that at least I know where I need to go. Now, over here, you can see a tiny dot appears in the darkness showing where you kind of need to go if you don't have your animal instinct turned on, or something like that. And generally with this game, something that I did find, which I'll touch upon the graphics later on, but in the early parts of the game, you're pretty much surrounded by a lot of darkness in a very dark castle, and you will have to look out for those tiny little like white triangles to basically guide you through to show you where it is you need to go next. And I kind of find that a bit difficult, especially if your room is not well lit. It can actually be very difficult to even see just those. So sometimes it is very helpful if your character sometimes, I guess, has the ability to cast lights, or if you are following an NPC, then it's a bit easier to move through the game. Alright, so now for the moment you guys have been waiting for, the true fighting combat abilities in the game. Now, starting off, you've got your basic melee attack, which is used by Square, and basically they give you a quick rundown of like training in the very beginning. So from melee on Square, you then have your magic abilities on Triangle. These can be ranged attacks, short range attacks. It just really depends on the magic that you put and slot in your Triangle.
Well done.
Next up, we had evasions. Now, there's two types of evasions. You've got your normal evasion and precision dodging. Now, with the normal evasion, essentially what would happen is as soon as the enemy attacks, you simply just dodge, but by jumping backwards. However, the second one is by as soon as they attack, if you can time it very well, you are then able to pretty much do a very large ranged evasion, almost as if you were teleporting to another location, which I found pretty cool. Now, the one thing that kind of pissed me off about combat, and it's not just in the training, but in between certain times in combat, at any random moment, you can just have a cinematic begin. You can be totally in a fighting mood, you're ready to kick some ass or whatever it may be, and then next thing you find, you're in a cinematic, which, I mean, I wouldn't want to skip, but obviously for story's sake, you would still engage in the cinematic itself, which was weird. Alright, lastly, now, one of the other features that you're able to do are called iconic feats, whereby you can use certain attacks using your innate ability. Of course, with Clive, he's able to use Phoenix powers. Another interesting thing was using your directional buttons, you were able to assign potions and other consumables that you can use, whether it be strengthening your armor using tonics or using potions to heal up. Alright, lastly, there was something that was very interesting in terms of the fights, and that was breaking an opponent's will. Now, underneath their health bar, which is red, they would have a yellow bar, which is their will. Their will was basically them, in layman's terms, them being strong enough to try and fight you, and the more damage that you do to them, you break down little bits and pieces of their will. Essentially, this will lead to something called a stagger, where the enemy loses the will to fight, takes a few minutes or, you know, a few moments to just heal and get back up on their feet. And in that time, you're able to do a whole lot more damage, as you can see here. And at the end of the time, you would have all of your damage pretty much stacked up all into one total amount. Now, of course, that total amount just basically mentions how much damage you dealt while the enemy was staggered. It's not to be confused with damage that will be done as soon as you're finished. And thus, every time you finish defeating an enemy, it will show the enemy's name, showing that you have slain them, to which will bring up a window showing whether or not you have leveled up, your experience points, your attribute points, as well as how much money you gained. Also, you'll be able to take a look at any spoils that you have received during the battle, and you can apply them right then and there if you'd like to, or just have them stack up and even destroy them for money. Earlier on in the video, I mentioned that you would have things like cinematic evasions and cinematic strikes. Now, in this scene right here, in the middle of a boss fight, I have a cinematic strike that I have to deal with, right? And what the cinematic strike is that when the screen flashes blue during a pivotal moment, if you press square right before the circle ends, like you just see right there, I pressed it pretty instantly, it would pretty much do a cinematic strike. No other easier way to say it. And the same can be said with the cinematic evasion as well. Now, dealing with all that I've mentioned, with the enemy's will, the lock-on system, the evasions, the strikes, the different abilities, watch now how a boss battle can take place and just what it's like. As someone who really likes hack and slash games, this really fell within my favorite type of fighting mechanism that I like to see in games generally. One thing I really enjoyed was with the lock-on system, it kind of helped quite a lot. However, it's not always useful, I would say. The only time I would ever need the lock-on system to be working was when I would chain up a certain combo attack, and if you've got an enemy that is locked on, you instantly move towards that enemy, which I found really nice. Otherwise, what would end up happening is that as you're busy fighting, you'd find that you're often just attacking any enemy that is closest to you and not really finishing them off, you know. Whereas if you lock onto a certain enemy, you're locked on until they're defeated, or, you know, if you just move your right analog to switch targets. But nonetheless, I really think the game gave you a lot of free room and free reign to pretty much just go ham with the buttons and defeat your boss by any means necessary. Giving you the certain tools to stagger their health and get some hits in, from nice evasions, you know, normal evasions and precision, as well as just the cinematic strikes and the cinematic evasions, which really help because, I mean, they add extra damage, they add extra evasion, whatever it is. Sometimes when you don't really need the lock-in events, the locking mechanism to kick in, jumbling my words, it's easy for you to just simply turn off and toggle the lock-in mode, and whenever the enemy is making some kind of attack and you don't want to stick to locking in on them just so that you have extra free movement, you can just do so in the middle of it all, which is perfect to me. So yeah, I'm gonna let this roll on for a bit so you can see just more of how certain fights in the game take place.
There's more.
All right. Lastly, now if there's something I need to mention, personally, me, Thamziri, hello, I have never actually played a Final Fantasy game besides Final Fantasy XIV online. Right, I needed something to just play whilst my WoW subscription was just too expensive and the game was boring at the time. So to this actual day, I have no idea what this game is about at all. Having played up to level 80 of a samurai on Final Fantasy XIV, I still have zero clue what the game is about. And I think it's because having played Final Fantasy XIV and still not knowing what it's about, my brain is pretty much wired to think, okay, I don't know any of the previous 13 games or what the story is about, so I wasn't going to focus too much, you know, in Final Fantasy XIV online. But let me tell you, okay, first of all, in this entire games campaign, I have no idea what led us here, what are we. I just know that in the family, you know, there's Clive, who you play with as the main character. Sometimes, well, in just one part of it, you can play as the little brother, Joshua, who is the family's dominant, and they're blessed by the mother crystal, to which the dominant, being Joshua, has he can shapeshift into a phoenix, right? But the thing is, one thing I'll always hail Final Fantasy for is the graphics and the animation, how every single character has a different build, design, the clothing that you find in the game, the way they talk, you know, voice actors, this, that, and such and such. It always amazes me how much budgets this game has. And at first you may think, you know, from where Final Fantasy came when it was 8-bit back in the day in terms of graphics, how far they have now come in terms of their animation and how realistic their animation is. It amazed me so much. Another thing is the game kind of does get a bit raunchy. Now and then in the game's dialogue, you'll hear a lot of swearing, but there are definitely some sexual references that do appear in the actual game itself. Right now, currently where you guys are watching, you know, we see this lady. Look at that. What she just says right there. I'm not even going to bleep that out because I want you all to just see what it's like. It's flipping insane. And then even here, first of all, let's talk about the size difference between the two of these guys. Okay, like, she tiny AF compared to this man. Her head is almost the size of his entire torso. As you can imagine, in SFW, you know exactly what I'm trying to think about. You know, what tears what open, what tears what apart, tearing new holes, you know, all that type of shit. So yeah, the game is pretty interesting in terms of I had completely underestimated its age rating as just as well as the content that's found within the game itself, right? Now, moving on to it, the one thing that I definitely loved about the storytelling and the pacing of it, right, as someone who writes books and someone who thoroughly enjoys fantasy type novels, anything that has to deal with magic whatsoever, right, this really intrigued me in terms of just the dynamic, you know, having a child be a dominant of a family, inheriting such a powerful magical ability, you know, so much so as turning into a flippin' phoenix, which you guys will see just now after all these flashbacks. But it's also the violence, the content within it, you know, with the voice acting, which was done superbly. You know, like the different voices of Clive, of Joshua, of the father, the mother, you know, all these other characters as well. And just look at this animation. It really invokes like a certain emotion when you're playing the game. I felt so valiant here. And the music score, oh my days, the music score is incredible. I mean, just take a listen to the cinematic masterpiece. Look at that. Look at the vibrant colors. incroyable.
The Phoenix! Joshua!
Look at that.
Joshua! Stop!
Just the emotion behind his voice alone is just incredible.
He's lost control. I have to do something. I have to save him. No, my lord. Fall back. Climb!
And then, of course, you know, the old school chocobos. The number one means of transport in the world of Final Fantasy. Not gonna lie, as someone who's never really played the game and not really knowing what goes on in the story, having just played the online game alone and still not knowing what goes on in that story, I will definitely say Final Fantasy is a game that I'm really looking forward to getting into. And, you know, if this is going to be the first Final Fantasy game I purchase, then I'm definitely getting Final Fantasy XVI. But anyways, guys, that is the end of the video. If you do like Final Fantasy, if you did like this demo and this game has really intrigued you, please make sure to get it on June 22nd, 2023 when it releases. And of course, if you enjoyed the video, please make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to find out more games that we do play. There may or may not be a possibility that we will actually play this game fully on our channel, as we do some Let's Play videos now and then. I think up until now we've only done The Sims 4, but we're likely to expand our range of games that we will play. Or hit us up in the comments and tell us what game you'd like us to cover, and we will we will make sure to take a look at it and see if we can pretty much just play the game from start to finish. Anyways, guys, once again, this has been your boy Thamziri from X to Skip, bringing you the Final Fantasy XVI demo review. I am super keen to get this game if it was obviously a bit cheaper, but I'm just going to leave it right then and there. Cheers, guys, and check you next time. Peace out.